video, or pwede rin namang teleconferencing, or pwede namang, for example, through call, or kung ano mang methods pa ang pwede natin gamitin. And of course, when I talk about synchronous learning, asynchronous learning, this one is a less connected but also less constrained format. This one, it takes place when students are given learning tasks with deadlines. Meaning to say, since may deadline, the goal is for the students to answer it before the deadline, but not necessary na sabay-sabay nilang gagawin. Unlike the synchronous sessions na live online lessons, dito, they would be given a deadline, but they can manage their own time. So for example, the deadline is on Friday. Pwede nang gawin ngayon, pwede nang gawin bukas, pwede nang gawin sa Friday ng umaga. So of course, the beauty of asynchronous learning gives flexibility. It gives flexibility to the parents, to the students, to the teachers as well, na i-prioritize kung ano pa yung mga bagay na kailangan din i-prioritize, of course, in this time of pandemic. Letter C, of course, is open schedule. For open schedule, it adds another layer of flexibility to online courses. It is considered a type of asynchronous course setup. Okay, asynchronous, hindi po sabay-sabay, but no deadlines will be set by the teacher. And ideal for learners with other demands on their time, such as professionals or stay-at-home parents. Ito naman, although hindi to kadalasan ginagawa sa regular school kasi wala talagang deadline, di ba? Pag asynchronous kasi, for example, kailangan matapos ko to this week, so deadline pa rin Friday. Pag open schedule, talagang kung kailan lang pwede yung bata, doon lang talaga nila gagawin yun. Right? So that is another way, of course, of distance learning. Number 4, of course, is fixed time. Di ba kung kanina open schedule, ito naman fixed time. So since it is fixed time, from the word itself, fixed, synchronous, okay? So it is a type of synchronous course that requires online users to visit a specific virtual location. Pag sinabi natin virtual location, for example, may panonoodin silang video, or for example, sabay-sabay sila sa isang video conferencing tool, okay, at a specific time and place, okay? So it allows students from anywhere, of course, in the world, to connect and interact online, unlike the rigid synchronous schedule. Okay? So, fourth, it's computer-based. Itong computer-based, hindi natin siya magagawa, unfortunately. But this is still considered distance learning. Pero ngayong panahon ng pandemya, this is something that we cannot do. But to give you an information about it, when you say computer-based, it is a fixed time. Okay? Pero synchronous lesson on computers. Kadalasan nasa computer lab sila. Okay? Most common in existing institutions that already have access to the necessary devices. Right? And lastly, of course, would have to be hybrid learning. Ito pong hybrid learning, di ba, alam naman natin itong hybrid learning. Sabi ng iba, it is a type of blended learning. But when I say hybrid, it's really more online and less face-to-face. Okay? So students, of course, can learn at the same time. And sometimes students can also be learning, of course, through asynchronous ways. All right. So those are the common types of distance learning. All right. So now let us talk about the benefits. Diba sabi nga natin, how would we convince the students that this is something na para sa kanila? Diba right now, if you would be scrolling your news feed sa social media, one of the many things na common na mababasa, nakakalungkot man, is online learning is not for me. Diba? A lot of students, a lot of teenagers, a lot of young individuals, talagang pinitwit nila yun na this is not for me. Meron nga ako nabasa parang, willing akong wag na magbakasyon, basta magkaroon na ng face-to-face classes because this is not really for me. Right? But of course, para matulungan natin sa kanila, they need to understand that distance learning also shares, of course, a different set of benefits na baka namang ma-discover din nila, of course, while doing distance learning. So we'll talk about the benefits. Ano-ano po ba yung benefits ng distance learning? Number 1, of course, is flexibility. Students can choose when, where, and how they learn by selecting the time, place, and medium for education. Indeed, this is, kumbaga, hindi to debatable, di ba? The top benefit of distance education is its flexibility. Okay? Why? Because as a student, you are given the freedom to choose when, where, how you want to learn, anong petsa, paano mo gusto matuto, and the like. For those who want to learn, for example, directly from the teachers, they can attend, of course, the video conferencing tools or watch the videos provided by the teacher. Yung mga gusto naman na, for example, nagsasagot ng worksheets on their own, mag-research, pwede rin po nilang gawin yun. That's the beauty, of course, of distance learning. Second, of course, it is, we have to admit it, easy access. Easy access once na familiar na tayo sa paggamit ng technology. Pero pag hindi pa tayo familiar, definitely, kumbaga medyo mas mahihirapan pa tayo. Right? So, remote learning or distance learning program offer every student the opportunity to learn and improve themselves rather, in the environment they find most effective. So whether due to remote location or being differently abled, some to educational facilities, di ba po? So remote learning programs offer every student the opportunity to learn and improve themselves in the environment they find most effective. So that is, of course, another strength or another beauty of distance learning. Another set of benefits, number 3, syempre no need to travel, di ba? So parents no longer have to rush to get their children ready for the bus or drive them to school. No surprise, of course, that ngayong pandemya, di ba, mas mababa din siguro yung gas prices, di ba? Because most of us, of course, are staying at home, di ba? Ngayon, pag lumabas ka, nag-drive ka, masasabi mo, sarap mag-drive kasi wala halos traffic and many more. So, of course, it's primarily because all of us stays at home, and which includes, of course, the parents, the teachers, and the students. So, this, of course, is also beneficial for everyone for financial reasons, kasi syempre mas nakakatipid tayo. Also for time management, hindi mo na kailangan gumising ng sobrang aga ka para bumahe, di ba? Let's say for example, your classes would start around 8 o'clock. Kahit 7 o'clock ka gumising, 7:30, you won't still be late. Pero before, kapag 8 o'clock ang klase mo, kailangan mga 5 pa lang gising ka na kasi you have to travel pa, you have to prepare, eat breakfast, and then the like. So that's another beauty, of course, of this distance learning. And lastly, of course, is time management skills. Why? Distance learning would teach us, both the parents, the teachers, and of course, the students, kumbaga enhance talaga dapat yung ating time management skills. Why? Because these skills are essential for succeeding in online schooling. We have to be reminded that time management skills are very important to gain academic success in remote learning. These skills are essential in every aspect of life. So in other words, kapag natutunan natin, 'di ba, na ma-manage yung time natin wisely, kumbaga hindi lang sa pag-aaral, ma-apply din natin yung sa ibang bagay. And of course, it would be beneficial for us in the long run. Okay? So distance learning forces the students to understand that the best ways for them to learn and implement those ways, of course, would have to be based dun sa kanilang mga sariling desisyon. So yung mga desisyon na yun, of course, if they would be making the wrong decision, walang pag time management, they will be facing the consequences. So at the end of the day, matututo pa din yan. So of course, in other words, distance learning does not only help our students become, kumbaga, develop the skills, acquire the knowledge in terms of the academics, but also it teaches them how to enhance, improve their time management skills. However, of course, whenever we talk about the beauty, syempre doon din yung horror stories, di ba? Or what we call the pitfalls. So we talk about the pitfalls of distance learning. What are the common pitfalls? Number 1, of course, minimal social interaction. Distance learning offers little interaction between the students and the teachers. So fellow students may also not be able to communicate at all. Diba, it limits, of course, our ways to communicate with our classmates, with our teachers. Ako, to be honest, ito yung isang bagay na pinakamahirap. Pero sabi ko nga, mahirap ito, pero magagawa ng paraan if you would do so. Because right now, with regards to the use of technology, parang wala namang imposible, di ba? So, pero ako pa nagkaklase ako, this is something na talagang medyo nahihirapan pa ako. How would I be able, of course, to create meaningful social interaction? Di ba? Kasi in a face-to-face setup, it's very easy to elicit responses from the students. But in an online environment, medyo mas challenging. So that's why I considered it a pitfall. Another one, of course, little support. Diba? Although when we talk about 21st century learning, students are responsible for their own learning. But still, of course, they need us to assist them. They need us to guide them. Okay? That is why I consider this one a pitfall. So this approach or distance learning relies heavily on the student's ability to study on his or her own. Okay? So since this distance learning approach relies heavily on the student's ability, okay, they need to, kumbaga, be responsible, that's one. Second, of course, they need to be resourceful in looking for additional resources or assessments na magagamit nila para mas maintindihan po nila yung lesson. Let's say, for example, nahihiya silang magtanong sa teacher. Unlike in a regular setup, marami silang pwedeng pagtanungan. Ngayon, syempre, mas limited yung social interaction. So, dapat talaga on their own, the kids would also be creative and innovative in looking for additional resources. Okay? Para yung support talagang hindi pa rin maging problema. Right? So, another pitfall that I have here would be accessibility. Okay? Kanina parang sinabi ko, accessible siya, pero at the same time, it can also be a pitfall. Okay? Why? Because of course, ito yung tinatawag na hashtag, no student left behind, di ba? Not everyone has gadgets or internet access. You may also find it difficult to get the materials for the courses if you live in a remote area. So for example, sige sir, modular learning ako. Problema, nasa kabundukan yung bahay mo. So how would the materials be delivered there? Eh, you cannot go out. It's too dangerous, di ba? Kaya nagiging sobrang challenge talaga itong accessibility, di ba? So kailangan lang natin mas maging creative. That's why DepEd created various types of distance learning para sa ating mga Filipino learners. And lastly, of course, it requires self-motivation. Learners get to be distracted easily as their learning environment is not controlled as that of a classroom. Di ba sa loob ng class, syempre, you would not be doing other things that unless makulit ka talaga because in front of you as a teacher, of course, you're surrounded by your classmates na nakikinig din. But right now, of course, may kanya-kanya tayong lugar, di ba? Yung iba sa atin, for example, habang nagkaklase, naka-social media, so there would be a lot of learning. Kailangan po talaga ang mga bata ay talagang motivated, focused, alam nila kung ano yung goal nila, goal-oriented dapat sila, of course, because if not, if wala silang self-discipline, then this would be really tough for them. All right? So distance learning 101, remote or distance learning and leading requires educators to harness and implement the power of technology to transform learning in new and exciting ways. When done well, it creates deeper human connections in virtual settings. In other words po, pag sinabi po natin na distance learning, gaya nung sinabi ko kanina, we must accept the fact na ang paggamit ng technology ay talagang makakatulong. We must not see technology as our enemy. Some of us kasi ang iniisip, naku, pag nasanay tayong gumamit ng technology, pagkatapos itong epidemya na to, wala na tayong silbi. Because the technology themselves would serve as the teachers of the students. But that is not true. Gaya dito, sinabi dito, di ba, parang the power of technology to transform learning. But then again, it has to be implemented well by the teachers. So in other words, technology, if not properly utilized by the educators, would have no purpose. So wag tayong matakot. Instead, let's maximize it. Wag nating i-avoid kasi kakampi natin sila. Kakampi natin yung mga gadgets, yung mga applications na to. So we must work hand in hand with them to of course create a better learning environment for our students. That is why here in the Philippines, the Department of Education, sabi nila, may tatlong ways ang distance learning na i-implement in the Philippines. First one would have to be modular learning or through printed modules. Sabi sa mga nabasa ko, ito daw yung most preferred ng mga parents and ng mga learners ngayon sa Pilipinas. So, for students who don't have access to gadgets and the internet, these printed modules will be delivered to them or picked up by their parents or guardians or ward at designated areas with assigned schedule. So, syempre, hindi pa din sila pwedeng lumabas. But then again, DepEd, of course, would be the one to provide these learning materials sa kanila po. Kumbaga, sabi ko nga kanina, if there's a will, there's a way. What about for those students who have access to internet? Ako, for me, siguro ito yung pinaka-promising sa distance learning na i-implement natin sa Pilipinas. Of course, we have online learning. So for students who have access to the internet, the Department of Education made an announcement that they will be utilizing DepEd Commons, di ba? So, pero sa ibang mga private school, like for example, kami, we have our own learning management system. So sa Vibal, of course, Vibal also has their own, her own learning management system, yung tinatawag natin na Vibal LMS or Vibal V Smart School. So these are online educational platforms developed by, of course, IT experts to support alternative modes of education. Okay? Third, of course, ito, medyo nag-trending to noong nakaraan, di ba? Kasi there was a mistake with regards to the answer and the choices provided. So, of course, meron din tinatawag ang DepEd. Sabi nila, di ba, gagawa sila ng DepEd TV or DepEd educational TV shows or radio shows. So, lessons will be delivered via radio and television. In fact, last May, the DepEd or the Department of Education mentioned that the PCOO secretary had offered government-run television and radio stations as platforms for delivering lessons during the pandemic. Diba? If I'm not mistaken, parang last week or 2 weeks ago, this has already started. Diba? Parang simulation na sila. So this is also something that, when we talk about modular learning, what is modular learning? Okay? It is a mode of teaching where printed materials like modules, activity sheets will be answered by the students at home. So when we talk about modular learning, it involves breaking courses or programs into small chunks that can be leveraged when and where needed. Di ba marami nagsasabi, modular learning and yung books mismo. Pag sinabi nating modular learning, kaya siya tinatawag na chunk learning kasi it can be by units. Kumbaga, nakahati siya na mas smaller units para at least mas madali siyang intindihin ng mga bata. And when we talk about modular learning, more often than not, pinapasa ito from time to time and the teacher will also be providing feedback. So in other words, hindi yan ibibigay tapos babalik na at the end of the school year. So that's how most schools actually do when we talk about modular learning. Okay? So again, we talk about modular learning. It is a mode of teaching where printed materials like modules, activity sheets, and then the like, gaya ng sinabi ko kanina, of course, will be used. And lastly, it is, of course, a mode of instruction where household members supervise the study routine because the teachers will not be with them, even virtually. Kasi pag sinabi nating modular learning, so pag may online, ando si teacher, ang madedeliver mo clearly yung curriculum, then of course that we can call that one, kumbaga, a module because it is expressed in terms of competence objectives. It meets the objectives, the educational objectives of the DepEd and of course of the institution where you're actually working. Okay? So now, what are the benefits of modular learning? Okay? So number one, better evaluation and more focused revision and improvement. Modifying a module is no doubt, okay, easier and more cost-effective than revising a course or one large module. So kapag, for example, may nakita kang error or may nakita kang points for improvement, dahil chunk by chunk siya, kaya nga chunk learning, mas madaling ibahin. So that is, of course, a strength of modular learning. Second, parts of the course can be used and reused in other courses. Di ba? Spiral curriculum din naman tayo. So let's say, for example, magagamit. Pwedeng, ito yung material ko. So, ika-copy-paste doon, i-edit para at least mas fitting, mas lalagyan ng challenge. So, it can be, of course, kumbaga shared content din tayo. So, of course, it makes things a bit easier. That's another advantage of modular learning. As long as we meet, of course, the learning objectives, especially the most essential learning competencies stated, of course, by the and given, of course, by the Department of Education. And number three, courses are more flexible and easier to convert for delivery in other formats. So kapag modular, of course, let's say for example, yung module na yon, pwede mong gamitin yun for online learning. Yung module na yon, pwede mo rin gamitin, for example, for radio and television. So mas flexible talaga siya. That's why it is considered another beauty, of course, of modular learning. Kasi nakapresent na siya chunk by chunk. Tapos, of course, andun din naman may motivation, may goals, may activities, assessments, and then the like. And lastly, of course, we have here, it enhances learner astronomy. Modular instruction is an alternative instructional design that uses developed instructional materials which are based on the needs of the students. Here in modular learning, students are encouraged to work on various activities that are interesting and challenging to maintain focus, attention, thereby encouraging independent study. Okay? So because of that, of course, the students engage themselves in learning concepts presented on the module. So they develop, of course, on their own, the sense of responsibility. Gaya ng sabi ko kanina, in 21st century learning, the students must know how to be responsible for their own learning. So sa modular learning, ganun yun. Kasi if they would not be studying it, if they would not be doing what's in the module, they would not be learning. So that's why they develop a sense of responsibility in accomplishing the task provided, of course, in the module. With little or no assistance from the teacher, the learners progress on their own. And of course, this helps them to be more responsible and at the same time, improve their time management skills. So yun yung ganda ng tinatawag natin na modular learning. What about online learning? Ito, I'd like to believe that siguro itong karamihan sa atin, ito talaga yung gagawin, di ba? Online learning. So mode of instruction that takes place over the internet and often referred to as e-learning. So gaya ng sinabi ko kanina, ito yung ginagamitan ng mga learning management system. So you will be meeting your students virtually, di ba? In a virtual space. So ito yung tinatawag natin na online learning. So now let us try to compare online learning and face-to-face learning. Sabi dito sa face-to-face, communication is primarily verbal. Siyempre sa online learning hindi pwedeng hindi sa online learning verbal siya pero technically it's going to be delivered virtually. Okay? Pero not necessary na verbal lahat. So face-to-face, the student is physically present and can be easily monitored. So sa online learning ito isa sa disadvantage. Kahit i-require mo lahat ng estudyante mo na mag-on ng cameras, hindi mo pa din sila makikita lahat-lahat kasi of course your eyes would be focused on the PowerPoint. Right now, for example, in my screen, andito yung PowerPoint, andito yung Zoom na camera. So technically, right now, I'm looking at the PowerPoint. So habang nakatingin ako doon, hindi ko naman makikita agad yung itsura ko sa camera. So the more na, ganun din sa klase, sa virtual class, synchronous class, hindi mo rin makikita lahat ng ginagawa ng lahat ng bata. That's why monitoring online is harder than in face-to-face. Here, students work on a specific subject at specific times. Diba? Kadalasan kapag face-to-face classes, hindi naman uso ang synchronous activity. Diba? Pero for online classes, of course, this has been a trend because this addresses our needs. Kumbaga, it helps us provide our other priorities. Kumbaga, mas mabibigyan natin ng oras yung mas kailangan. And of course, the most vocal students are the ones who participate the most, which is of course different from online learning. Tingnan naman po natin yung sa online part. Student may feel alone and unsupported, indeed. Ito po yung isa siguro sa nakakalungkot din na part. Some students, lalo na yung mga hindi nagtatanong, isipin nila, parang hindi ko naiintindihan, so ayoko na intindihin. Di ba? Parang nalulungkot na lang sila. Sabi nga nila, di ba, parang may mga post din po online. I'm not sure if you also read the same thing. Sabi parang, what they miss the most from face-to-face classes is the emotional touch. Yung emotional touch daw na binibigay ni teacher at binibigay ng mga kaklase nila, mga kaibigan nila. So that's something, of course, that they will be missing in virtual education. Next, students have choice in when and where to work because, of course, online learning promotes flexibility. Okay, so it allows students to access information in their most convenient time and, of course, in their most preferred format. Baga pwede sabay-sabay pa rin tayo magtutuno. Basta ibibigay sa inyo oras if it's synchronous. If it is asynchronous, a deadline, of course, will be given. Lastly, of course, curriculum is delivered through a learning management system. In fact, there are a lot of Facebook groups na parang they're claiming na wala silang learning management system. So what they will be using is Facebook as their own learning management system. So of course, ito talagang pinakita ng teachers na kailangan maging creative. Let's say for example, unfortunately, hindi pa talaga kaya ng school magkumuha ng isang facility online. So what they do, they use what is of course available, which is of course a Facebook group, diba? Facebook Messenger group. Dun sila gumagawa ng mga activities and they're using Facebook and other social media tools as learning management systems. Okay? So what are the things na parehas naman po for face-to-face and online? Students interact with content, definitely. In face-to-face, kahit naman andun sa teacher, at times talagang ang estudyante would also exert effort para mas intindihin yung lesson. Siguro mas mabigat lang yung responsibility online because the students, of course, would also have to exert talagang effort in understanding the lessons should they be encountering some difficulties. Next, of course, structure is important. They need clear objectives, need immediate feedback, standard and curriculum, teacher monitor and assess. So in other words, yung assessment, yung objectives, lahat naman yung kailangan pa din. Whenever there are face-to-face classes, we present objectives to our students. Actually, mas crucial siya sa online. Bakit po? Para makita ng bata, nakinig nga ako kay teacher online. Ang tanong, na-meet ko ba yung objectives? Because if not, then the student would have to do something about it. Let's say, for example, nakalagay doon objectives. The student should be able to use the common usage, for example, the commonly confused words and meaningful sentences. Ang nagawa lang ng bata, naintindihan niya yung definition ng word pero hindi na kayang gamitin sa sentence. So in other words, the job of the student is not yet done. Okay? So the student must, on his own, explore hanggang ma-meet niya yung objectives. If hindi, that's the time, of course, that he or she talks with the teacher and asks for intervention or assistance. All right? Now, the biggest question is online learning effective? Ito po, ang dami talaga nagtatanong nito, lalo na yung mga bata, di ba? Sabi talaga nila, online learning is not for me. Pero ako, naniniwala ko, it is meant for them. Hindi lang talaga, siguro sa ngayon pa, we have to practice and we have to choose talaga the best teaching pedagogy na pwede natin gamitin online, of course, to make learning more meaningful for them. Okay? So online learning can be as good or even better than in-person classroom or the physical face-to-face classes. Okay? So research has shown that students in online learning perform better than those receiving face-to-face interaction. But it has to be done right. Gaya ng sinabi ko kanina sa inyo, the main problem, if I'm not mistaken, or at least in my own assumption, ang problema talaga dito why online learning is not meaningful for the students is because we're not used to it. Okay? The teachers still do not know what to do. Some teachers, they just create the PowerPoint, or the PowerPoint that they actually used before, they will upload it online, and then that's it. But that's not online learning. Demands conversation, negotiation from the teachers and the students as well. So ako po, bakit naman, according to Dr. Christine Greenhow. Now, some of you might be wondering, bakit? How come that research actually shows na possible na mas maging maganda at productive ang online learning? It's primarily because we have to understand, and we must never forget, that our learners are members of the Generation Z. They are digital natives. And as digital natives and as members of the Generation Z, they have innate skills of using technology. So in other words, they're very comfortable in using the virtual space. Okay? Kaya lang, ang tanong, tayo ba teachers, komportable na? Because if we're not comfortable, then mararamdaman ng bata yan. And of course, it would greatly affect their learning. So that's something, of course, that we have to address. Now, let's proceed with the advantages of online learning. So what are the beauty or what are the strengths of online learning? One, online learning allows students to go at their own pace and on their own time. Gaya ng sinabi ko po sa inyo, it is inevitable that students, one, would encounter, kumbaga, for example, health issues or problems sa lugar nila. Meron ako naging estudyante na parang nagkaroon ng konting, for example, syempre, yung emotional impact nitong COVID, medyo mabigat. So kung talagang, for example, if you think you're not ready for the job or ready for example, to study, then that's the time, of course, na pwede ka pang mag-leave na onting oras, of course, and access these things in your own pace and your most convenient time. So that's the beauty, of course, of online learning. Kumbaga, the students are given flexibility with regards to how they want to learn, and of course, paano sila matututo, saan sila matututo, at kailan nila i-access yung mga instructional materials that you will be uploading para matuto. Second, online learning allows instructors and teachers to experiment with educational technology innovations. Ako po, I'd like to believe that this is a beauty of online learning, pero kailangan matutunan natin, di ba? Online learning makes the educational journey of the students more personalized and flexible. That is why if we would be, like, for example, employing gamification, papasukan natin na sa damakmak activities so the use of Kahoot. Of course, another one, online learning is an excellent way to increase student. Kanina share ko sa inyo, sabi ko, isa pa to sa bagay na nahihirapan ako. I have to admit that one. But then according to a lot of researches, this is possible. Okay? Many researches actually conclude that online learning increases student engagement. Ako yung nagpe-face-to-face, whenever I use technology, I notice that the students are more interested. I notice that the students are more responsive. Diba? Pero right now that we're using full online, syempre naninibago pa tayo lahat. So, since naninibago pa tayo, of course, we have to adjust muna. Pero definitely, if we would be creative and if we would be innovative, then of course, this is something that we can do. Increase student engagement through the conduct of online classes. Next, of course, number 5, online learning helps the teacher in checking the assessment and giving feedback of the students. Diba, admit it or not, one of the many things na pinaka-mahirap talaga is to give immediate feedback sa output ng bata. Minsan sa dami ng estudyante natin, sa dami ng tsatsikan, diba, kulang talaga yung oras natin. But in an online learning, let's say for example, they would be answering tests through Google Forms. Ang bilis na, may sagot, may check na agad pagkatapos. If you have, for example, your own learning management system, kagaya for example sa Vibal, meron silang Vibal B-Smart LMS. Kapag nag-exam ang bata gamit yon, may record book na, lalabas agad yung, may class record ka pa. Attendance, pwede mo rin i-check, di ba? So the students are given feedback, at immediate feedback, and of course, this feedback, they use this as a way na, okay, kailangan ko pa bang mag-aral? Kailangan ko pa bang mag-effort ng sobra para mas maintindihan yung lesson? Or naintindihan ko ba? Or baka naman akala ko naintindihan ko, pero hindi ko pala naintindihan. Right? So, of course, the immediate feedback helps them, of course, make learning more effective. Okay? And of course, another advantage of online learning, e-learning or online learning is the greener option, di ba? And definitely, no doubt, online learning is certainly the more effective option for students. Not only the more effective option for students in distance learning, but it is also better for the environment. Kasi di ba, hindi naman natin kailangan magpapasa ng papel. Instead of asking them to write down, pwede sila magkaroon ng digital notebook. Diba? Pero of course, it depends to the policies, to the systems of the school where we're actually working. Okay? So always remember, according to Dr. Christine Greenhow, educators cannot just scan the textbook, record the lesson, and put them online. and expect the same or better learning. Ito yung sinabi ko rin po kanina that I have to reiterate kasi I'd like to believe that some of us teachers, misconception ito. Some of us are thinking na, ay, i-upload ko lang to, yung PowerPoint ko dati, okay na to. O yung Manila paper na sanlatan ko dati, itatype ko lang, isasend ko sa bata, that's it. But that is not online learning. Okay? We have to make it personalized. Diba? We have to be creative, we have to be innovative. Okay? Para at least mas matuto po yung bata. This is the biggest disadvantage of online learning. If we teachers do not know what is it, diba? What is ano po ba talaga ang distance learning? Kung hindi natin alam yun, technically, that will be the biggest disadvantage of this kind of learning setup. Okay? So now let us go to the disadvantages. Ayan, nahiwalay yung S. Okay, so disadvantages of online learning. Teachers need to distill their key goals and leverage technology features to meet them. Some teachers lack, of course, of experience in designing and deploying teaching experiences online. Actually, hindi nga sa amin, siguro boss. Diba? Kasi yung iba naman sa atin, na-try din naman, pero once a week, twice a week. In Mapua, if I'm not mistaken, talaga nag-online learning sila from time to time, even before the pandemic. So online learning, of course, requires additional skills from the teachers, diba? Particularly in using technology. Another disadvantage when it comes to using technology pagdating sa teachers, we teachers, educators are tempted to add multimedia bells and whistles that detract from the core learning objectives. Minsan sa dami na nakikita natin online, sige, lagay. But the thing is, we have limited time para sa bata. So kakalagay natin na kung ano-ano, hindi natin nabigyan ng focus yung ating core learning objective. That is why, of course, whenever we're creating a material, dapat talaga goal-oriented tayo. Alam natin kung ano yung goals natin for the day. Second disadvantage, online learning provides insufficient support for vulnerable learners. And in other words, online learning might even harm more those who need the most help. Kumbaga yung mga may sabi nating slow learners, parang mas mahihirapan pa sila dito kasi nga definitely they have to learn on their own. But of course, this does not go for all. Kasi may mga bata na mas pabor sa kanila itong online learning kasi siguro the parents would be there with them or baka naman dahil mas komportable sila sa setup na ganito kaya siguro mas okay sa kanila. But at least for most students who badly need help, baka mas maging kumbaga mahirap sa kanila itong instructional delivery mode na ito. Number 3, some students do not have access to high-functioning educational equipment and suffer from poor connectivity. Actually, alam niyo po, to be honest, kahit nga minsan may internet ka na di ba? May internet, naka-wifi ka naman, di ba? Kaya nga nagiging normal yung, for example, minsan na parang, ay, sa Twitter, awit naman tong connection na to, di ba? Meron doon, tapos nakatag yung mga different telecommunications companies and then the like. So, this is something, of course, that we have to be able to address. Also with the help of our government. Kasi, if I'm not mistaken, parang ako, based on my own observation, parang lahat ng telecommunication network na reklamo na sa online learning. So, I think there must be really something na kailangan nating ma-develop dito sa ating bansa para ma-improve, of course, yung connectivity ng buong Pilipinas. Alright? Number 4, learners might not feel the much needed teacher presence, especially for the younger ones. Alam niyo po, teachers, hindi ko ma-imagine na mag-online learning ka for grade 1, for kinder, for grade 2, dati. Diba? Sinisip parang, ang hirap. But then, nakakatuwa kasi I have some friends na nagpo-post sila sa Facebook. They're really amazed. Kumbaga, they find it really exciting because they actually watch their kid while having their classes. Nakikita nila kung paano natututo. Nakikita nila, kumbaga parang they appreciated more yung educational journey ng bata. So, sabi ko nga, talagang kailangan maging creative lang. But definitely, it would be very hard kasi there must be partnership, di ba? Lalo na dito kasi hindi naman natin mabibigay talaga, aminin natin, fully, yung guidance, yung emotional touch online. So, the parents, of course, must be there to, of course, supplement that one para sa ating mga kabataan. Okay? Number 5, online learning brings up many concerns about screen time in the classroom. Definitely eye strain. Ako po, to be honest, parang recently sumasakit na yung mata. Ulo ko palagi padating ng mga 4 p.m., 3 p.m. kasi nga kakatapat sa computer, sa laptop, from time to time. So eye strain. Kaya advisable din talaga na yung schedule sa mga klase talagang shorter compared to the usual. Okay? Also, syempre, yung iba, blue lens ba yung tawag doon, if I'm not mistaken, para ma-avoid din yung mga eye strain and of course, other diseases na pwedeng makuha kakatitig sa computer, watching, of course, your teachers, watching the facilitators of different webinars, and then the like. And of course, another one, ito pinakapangit talaga ako, dito ako nalulungkot. Students may cheat during exams using digital tools and equipment. Gaya ng sinabi ko sa inyo kanina, online learning is for the students because they have innate skills in terms of using technology. So in other words, sanay sila sa paggamit ng technology. At kung hindi tayo sanay, pwede nila tayong mautakan. 'Di ba? Ang daling mag-copy paste online pag may essay question ka or pag may tanong ka, search nila online. Definitely, matututo may mga bata dun. So hindi. So as teachers, this is something that we have to address. Okay? Dapat magkaroon tayo ng protocols, ng strategies on how we would be able, of course, to avoid cheating cases. Right? Lastly, we talk about distance learning in the Philippines. Ito yung tinatawag na through broadcasting or through radio and TV. Okay? So learning delivery mode that uses radio and television to support access to remote learning. If I'm not mistaken, IBC 13 ata ang ginagamit ng DepEd. Parang noong nakaraan, I also saw a letter, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong, but if my memory serves me right, parang ABS-CBN also offered their services para makapag-deliver ng educational shows, of course, hosted by the Department of Education. Dito, kaya lang po, mukha siyang exciting, pero it would be very challenging. Okay? Let me show you 4 major challenges of this kind of distance learning. One, content. Diba? Aminin natin, before may sineskwela, may mga iba't iba pang TV shows, pero recently bihira na yan, di ba? So, wala din naman talaga tayo, hindi naman tayo nag-stock din ng ganyan. So, in other words, non-availability of the educational content in audio-video formats. Meron tayong mga PowerPoint, pero hindi naman, meron tayong video, pero hindi naman yung talagang pang-broadcasting na it would be show, it would be watched by everyone, of course, dito sa ating bansa. Second, of course, would have to be partnerships, okay? So the absence of pre-existing partnerships for the broadcasting of the educational content. Hindi naman pwedeng, tanggalin mo yung palabas mo, papalabas kong ganito. Hindi naman pwedeng ganun. Of course, it's also business, di ba? So hindi naman pwedeng magbigla na lang baguhin yung TV show just because of this kind of setup. So there are a lot of things that must be considered. Kaya yung partnership, isa din yan sa issue. Third, of course, is expertise. Alam nyo po, kanina Miss Michelle mentioned that I am also handling the student publication. Of course, in my experience as a student publication advisor, part ng radio broadcasting, TV broadcasting, hindi po madali. Sobrang hirap po. It's not a matter of reading and delivering it na parang nagbabasa ka lang ng speech, no. Broadcasting is something that cannot be learned overnight. Diba? So talagang kailangan pong paghirapan at pag-igihan. Okay? So lack of skills, know-how, and expertise of teachers, producers, and of course, of broadcasters. Kaya di ba, nung nakaraan, para may nakita kong post pa na si Paulo Bidiones, si Hermat Meseca, ng kanilang speaker sa DepEd, ng mga teacher broadcasters. So talagang kailangan talaga ng rigorous training dyan kahit may pandemya. Because they cannot, of course, show TV shows ng mga teachers na hindi rin ganun kagaling pa sa broadcasting. So mahirap po, hindi siya madali. Okay? And of course, fourth will have to be time. Ito ang kalaban natin lahat. I think this is also the reason why, one of the reasons why the Department of Education made an announcement last week na from August 24, classes will be moved for public schools and other private schools sa October 5. Diba? Why? Because it's not easy to prepare for distance learning. Here dito po sa TV and radio, difficulties of different countries in producing content both in quantity and quality in short time. They have limited time for training. Magkusulat pa ng script yan, magpa-practice pa yan, mag-edit ng video, mag-shoot. So, ang dami pong kailangan gawin, right? And of course, time is badly needed. So, in other words, hindi po madali, right? Hindi madali ang distance learning because there are a lot of changes. Pero ko po, what I believe is, your body or our body can stand almost anything. It's our mind that we cannot convince. So, in other words, it's all in the mind, di ba? Yung mindset natin, yun yung tunay na what matters the most. If we would be thinking that we cannot do it, then definitely we cannot do it. If the students would be thinking, okay, this online learning is not for me, then definitely online learning will not be for them. But if the students would be thinking, ay, para sa akin to, gagawin ko to dahil gusto ko matuto, then definitely it will help them. Diba? Because it's all in the mind, right? So as teachers, our job, of course, is to help our students embrace the idea that online learning is for them. Diba? Hindi yan pasakit, hindi yan pahirap para sa kanila. This is something, of course, that would be beneficial for them in the long run. So now, the question is how? Paano po ba natin i-overcome yung challenge na to? Okay? So allow me to show you 7 steps, okay, to academic success. All right? So let's start with the first one. Okay? The first one, of course, is becoming and staying responsible for themselves. High motivation is required to complete distant courses because the day-to-day contact with teachers and other students is typically lacking. Diba? Instructors can help motivate distant students by providing consistent and timely feedback. So, ito po kasi yung challenge yan eh. How would we help our students become responsible for their own learning? Diba? Of course, as instructors, ang pwede natin gawin, we give timely feedback because it encourages them to do better. Okay? So, and of course, also helps reinforce effective student study habits. Okay? Second, owning one's strengths, desires, skills, and needs. Our students, it is really a must, they need to recognize their strengths and their limitations. Hindi pwedeng sasabak na lang sila lang hindi nila alam kung ano yung kaya nila at ano yung hindi nila kaya at ano yung kailangan nilang improve pa. Okay? The students need to understand that their learning goals and objectives. Kaya nga po, ito po yung manggagaling sa atin. So it's really a partnership between the teachers and the students. Okay? So the instructor can help the students to explore their strengths and limitations and their learning goals and objectives by assuming a facilitative role in the learning process. Providing opportunities tayo pong teachers for students to share their personal learning goals and objectives where, of course, helps them to make learning more meaningful and increases motivation. So we also have to give them a first chance to prove and to show what they actually learn. Okay? So third, monitoring and increasing self-esteem. Ako po, honestly speaking, ang lagi kong sinasabi sa mga bata ko, parang nothing is impossible as long as they would be able to believe what they can do. Nothing is possible. But the sky is the limit. I always tell them that everything would not be easy at first, at the beginning, but sooner or later, if they would be doing their part, if there would be exerting extra effort, then definitely, brighter days are coming, right? So distant students, our remote students, the online learners, they may be afraid of their ability to do well in a course, diba? Student performance is enhanced if learners set aside time for their instructional activities and if they receive family support in their academic endeavors. So the instructor can maintain student self-esteem by providing timely feedback and of course by building a stronger connection with the parents of the students. In other words, our words as teachers, the words of the parents as formators, malaking bagay po ito to increase the self-esteem of the students. We have to make them feel that they can do it. Hindi yung tipong tayo mismo, sinasabi natin na, ay, ang pangit talaga ng online learning. Diba? Kasi kung ganun yung pag-iisip natin, ganun din yung isipin ng bata, ay wala talagang mangyayari. Diba? It starts, of course, by creating the right mindset. So how do we create the right mindset? We will show, of course, na ito dapat yung kind of thinking nila. Diba? So we help them. We increase their self-esteem and their self-confidence, right? And of course, number 4, relating to others. Students often learn most effectively when they have opportunity to interact with other students. So interaction among students typically leads to group problem solving. Okay? So when students are unable to meet together, appropriate interactive technology should be provided to encourage small group and individual communication. So ako po, to be honest, nung una sabi ko, may group activities pa ba pag online learning? Parang kasi kawawa yung mga bata na hindi mabugrupo sa freeloaders, diba? But then I realized, part 2 ng 4Cs social communication, diba? Skills talagang kailangan ma-develop. Aside from that, the students must feel that they are not alone, right? That they also have their peers with them, experiencing the same thing, doing their best to survive, to be better. And of course, pag naramdaman nila to, it would help them, of course, overcome the challenge of distance learning, right? Next, clarifying what is learned. So distant students or remote students or the online learners need to reflect on what they are learning. Okay, they need to examine the existing knowledge frameworks in their heads and know how these are being added or changed by incoming information. How do we measure them? One, of course, by giving examination, pen and paper exams, by giving them class presentations, performance tasks, or other opportunities for the students and the teacher, of course, to assess learning. So mahalaga po yan. We have to clarify to them from time to time, ano pa yung naintindihan nila? Baka mamaya mali na po sila naiintindihan, right? So that is another way, of course, of ensuring na talagang we would be surviving online learning. Next is redefining what legitimate knowledge is. Adult learners or our students nowadays may find it difficult to accept that their own experience and reflections are legitimate knowledge. If the instructor takes a facilitative rather than authoritative role, students will see their own experience as valuable and as important to further learning. So in fact, researchers suggest that having learners use first-person language to help them claim ownership of personal values, experiences, and insights. In other words po, wag natin kunin kung ano yung role na ng bata. Gone are the days that, of course, we serve as the main actors and the main actresses of our own classrooms. This time, our own virtual classrooms. Okay? The students must also feel, kumbaga, yung how to be a facilitator. Right? It would not be, saka hindi lang po pwede na parang tayo lang palagi na tayo lang authority, tayo lang masusunod and the like. Right? And lastly, of course, dealing with content. So student learning is enhanced when content is related to examples. Ang tawag ko dito palagi, ibalik mo sila sa realidad. Diba? For example, I taught Romeo and Juliet. So nandun kami sa mundo ni Romeo at ni Juliet. Pero after the lesson, kailangan ko sila ibalik sa realidad. I have to connect the world of Romeo and Juliet to Anglo-Saxon literature, to the world that we are actually, kumbaga, where we are living right now. So connect them. Of course, connect to reality, synthesis. Ito yung tinatawag nating dealing with content. Para at least mas maging meaningful sa kanila yung ginagawa nila. Mas maging meaningful sa kanila yung learning experiences nila. And if we would be following all those things, then definitely there's no way but for them to gain academic success. That is for sure. Kumbaga, walang duda yan, right? So, after sharing with you, of course, how to overcome challenges when it comes to distant learning, mahalaga din, of course, that our students would have a digital mindset, di ba? In the field of education, the goal is not only to supply the students with skills and knowledge, but also, of course, to foster the ability to problem solve and, of course, to take challenges, to surpass challenges, because this helps our students to tackle issues that they face outside the school. Okay? That's why a lot of researchers have demonstrated that the mindset, ang pag-iisip po ng mga kabataan ngayon, plays as a critical factor that impacts how comfortable and motivated they are when posed with a new or difficult problem to solve. In other words, right now that we're dealing with something new, okay, an innovation, ang tawag ko nga dito is a learning innovation, itong distance learning, dapat ang mindset ng bata nasa positive side. Pag nasa negative kasi yan, it means it would be harder for them, of course, to fully grasp the beauty of distance learning. Now, allow me to present to you, of course, the two different types of mindset. Ang tinatawag natin na fixed mindset and, of course, growth mindset. As you can see in the picture, of course, yung fixed mindset nakalagay dyan, ignores feedback, doesn't try, gives up easily, avoid challenges, mistakes are bad. Why? Kasi ito yung mindset ng mga bata na parang, online learning is not for me. So wala na akong gagawin. Kasi hindi nga para sa akin. So kung ganun ang pag-iisip ng bata, hindi sila matututo. That's why we're here. Right? If they have that kind of mindset, then we have to change that mindset to growth mindset. We have to make them think na, okay, learning comes from failure. We learn from mistakes. So we just need to put more effort. We have to embrace challenges like this, for example, distance learning. And we have to learn from feedback. So that is the growth mindset. So kailan po ba ito nagsimula at sino nagpasimula itong mindset po na to? Of course, Dr. Carol Dweck, a professor from Stanford University, spent decades, a lot of time examining how students' own theories of intelligence reflect their behavioral and psychological response to academic challenges, just like, of course, this one, online learning. So along with her colleagues, Dr. Dweck found that the student's approach to a challenge is typically aligned with one of the two outlooks on intelligence. It can either be fixed, gaya ng sinabi ko kanina, they don't really welcome opportunities, or it can be growth mindset, yung mindset na pwedeng magbago, right? So specifically, of course, for obvious na to students who possess a growth mindset are more motivated to learn. So these are the students who really try their best to take on challenges, surpass the challenges. So of course, the rate of academic success is higher for them rather than for those students who have the fixed mindset. Okay? So this is what we call, of course, the mindset theory. Okay? According to the mindset theory, students who possess a fixed mindset believe that intelligence is stable and cannot change. Yun nga, for example, ay bago to hindi ako natututo, so hindi para sa akin. Dati, for example, no face-to-face setup, Bobo talaga ako sa math, kaya tanggap ko na yun. Bang English lang ako. Kaya hindi talaga ako marunong mag-English, hanggang numbers lang ako. That's fixed mindset, right? But of course, students with a growth mindset believe that their intelligence can be improved with work. So, itong mga may growth mindset, ito naman yung mga estudyante na, I know, mahina ako sa English, I would have to read books, I would have to listen to, like for example, TV shows that uses the English language for me to develop my speaking skills, my capabilities as a speaker. Right? Pero kapag yung fixed mindset ka, hindi na ako mag-e-effort, nagsasayang lang ako ng oras. So, yun po yung dalawang pag-iisip ng mga bata ngayon. So, dapat, syempre, we have to help them develop the growth mindset, right? Now, how do we help them develop the growth mindset, right? So, meron po tayong 4. Okay? So, number 1, praising the student's effort, not the student's intelligence. So, wag nating sabihin na, ang talino mo talaga. Kasi baka ma-receive ng bata, di ba, pang matalino lang yan, bobo nga ako. Diba? So that's something that, although ako hindi ako naniniwalang may tao bobo, kasi hindi naman talaga totoo yun, right? So, lamang lang sa kasipagan yung isa over, of course, that specific person. So, research has demonstrated that praising a student's intelligence is not really the best way to motivate the student's learning. Okay? So, students praise for intelligence over effort typically display less task persistence, less task enjoyment, and worse task performance on future tasks after a failure than students who were praised for the same effort in the same situation. Kasi inisip niya, pinuri mo ako dahil matalino ko, hindi naman mawawala yung talino kahit hindi ako mag-aaral. Right? Pero pag pinuri mo ko dahil masipag ako, I have to continue working on, I have to continue, of course, na magpinupuri mo. Of course, as a student, we want to be appreciated. So that's something that I will be doing. Right? Second, comforting students who are struggling by providing them less work. So when teachers comfort students who are struggling by providing them less work or less challenging tasks, they may inadvertently demotivate those students to persist through future challenges. So as teachers, 21st century teachers, we're also coaches. Di ba kapag coaches, kapag let's say for example, natalo ang team mo, what do you do? Diba? You motivate them. Hindi mo sila sabihin, naku, talunan talaga tayo. Hindi pwedeng ganun. We have to comfort them and we have to teach them a lesson. And teaching them a lesson, of course, is providing intervention. Ito yung tinatawag natin na binibigay nating tulong, especially to those who are really struggling. Ano po yung panibawang tulong na yun? Pwedeng, for example, mas onti yung binibigay mong trabaho sa kanya para at least slowly, hindi siya na-overwhelm na, ayun, dami kong gagawin, hindi ko pa nga naintindihan to, nadagdagan pa. So, tulungan din natin yung mga bata, right? So, we have to understand that learners right now are there first. Number 3, inspire and support students, not judge them. Okay. Researchers prove the importance of the role of the teacher in inspiring and in supporting the students. Okay. And of course, not in judging the students. Rather than deciding who is smart, who is not, the role of the teacher in a growth mindset-focused classroom is to collaborate with students to grow everyone's knowledge. Kumbaga, you have to be a teacher not only for those who are good, but you have to be a teacher for all students. Huwag mong i-judge na, uy, baksa ka dati, so mahina yan. Huwag na yan, ayoko na dyan. Diba? Kaya ako, to be honest, pag nagkaklase po ako, bihira ako magtanong na, sino dito yung mga baksakan dati? Why? Because I really do not look at the previous records and rely to these previous records whenever I grade my students. Okay? I grade them based on their efforts. Sabi ko nga sa kanila, yung first quarter grade nyo, pwedeng for example 95 kasi masipag kayo. Second quarter, pwedeng 70. Bakit 70? Kung nagbago kayo Diba? So that is of course a grade for a specific quarter. Right? Hindi naman nag-grade nung may previous quarter. Although some schools ini-implement nila 30% ng first quarter bago kumuha ng second and the like. So depende rin sa performance of course ng mga bata. Okay? And lastly, emphasize that the brain is capable of significant change. Tandaan po natin yan. We have to tell them that our weapon right now, of course, we have a flexible brain. We have a brain that can make the impossible possible. Diba? So another strategy is to highlight the plastic nature of brain development. The notion that the brain is capable of significant change and that change can be achieved through work. Okay? So kailangan po talaga natin magtrabaho. We have to make these things possible. So mindset talaga. Right? So indeed, some of you might be thinking whenever there are mistakes, mali na yan. Ako sometimes, I look at mistakes as learning opportunities. Diba? There are times wherein we have to celebrate when mistakes are made. Kasi this is where we, teachers, parents, students, of course, learn best. Diba? We learn best of course through experience, specifically whenever we're committing mistakes. So mahalaga po talaga ito. Pero syempre, if we can learn naman without committing mistakes, then that's better. But then, of course, whenever there are mistakes, wag naman natin i-judge yung mga bata na, ay, papalpa ka lang palagi, right? No. So we also have to be open-minded that these mistakes can also open to us new opportunities that we can actually have for our, of course, for a better, to provide a better learning environment para sa mga kabataan. Now, let me discuss to you 6 ways to foster a growth mindset using educational technology. Di ba kanina po I focus on online learning. So right now, I was thinking, how can we be able to maximize the use of educational technology in helping our students develop a growth mindset? Okay? So I have here 6, all right? So papakita ko po Okay, first, choice over learning path and the opportunity to take learning risks. Okay? So many educational technology tools allows the students to learn at their own pace, monitor their own progress, choose their own activities from a list of options at the right difficulty level. So we have to give them options. We have to give them opportunities to make choices. And of course, to take greater risks, di ba? Na I have to, kailangan maging persistent sila on choosing more challenging activities, especially when they fail. Para at least talagang, kumbaga ma-surpass nila kung ano yung limits nila, and of course, ma-improve nila kung ano talaga yung kailangan na ma-enhance. Second, of course, continuous feedback on ongoing effort. So effective educational programs provide continual feedback to students through animations and progress monitoring, such as sprints, completion of a task, and so on and so forth. Ako po, halimbawa dito, pag sinabing feedback, di ba sa Vibal po, meron, kapag nagsagot kayo ng courseware, lumalabas, for example, ilang percent na yung progress mo, 20% na, 30% na. So yung part kasi na yun, it gives the students appreciation, and of course, it helps them to be more motivated to continue doing good, diba? And actually be better pa. Okay, third, of course, is the annotation of progress through competencies gain. Actually, it's almost connected to the second one. Meaningful programs track a student's accumulated knowledge beyond just providing a grade. Being able to log into a program at any time to see a visual representation of all that one has learned can have a big impact in building competence, reinforcing that knowledge is gained through effort, and that deep learning is something, of course, that can be gained over time. Okay, so mahalaga din po yan that of course we would not be locking our students sa grade lang, diba? Their efforts should always be appreciated, and of course the fact na itong deep learning is something that can be gained over time, na kailangan pa nag-effort sila matututunan nila, and of course that's the biggest, the most precious prize of all their efforts. Fourth, personalized materials that challenges and engages students. So again, meaningful learning tasks need to challenge every student in some way. Ako po, I always believe kapag walang challenge, hindi na matututo yung bata. Dapat talaga, the challenges would have to be there para at least the students would have to exert more effort to meet, of course, the learning target. So, we have to give them continuous na challenges talaga from time to time kasi it helps them to, of course, exceed kumbaga, the expectations set upon them. Next, of course, continuous opportunities for individualized practice with mechanisms for teacher support. So educational technologies not only allow students to face challenges scaffolded to their own skill level. In fact, many of these technologies also provide opportunities to try different approaches or strategies to complete activities and allow students to learn from personalized, timely feedback para sa individualized practice, right? And of course, lastly, letter F, fostering supportive classrooms and school-to-home connections. So here, of course, engaging educational technologies can be a way for students to talk about where they are, where they have been, and where they are going in the educational technology program. So kailangan po, siyempre, yung connection talaga, sobrang, it would play a significant role. Students can celebrate each other's successes. Let's say, for example, nakatapos na ako, so that is something that is worth celebrating. So, and of course, through these various educational platforms, we can offer the assurance na when there are challenging tasks, okay, we are here for them. but the mentors are here for them. Their peers are here for them. So it helps them. It helps the students, of course, develop the growth mindset. Na I'm not alone. So I'm with I'm with my mentors. I'm with my friends. So this is something that I should not be afraid of doing. Right now. So having said all of those things, nakita naman siguro natin kung gaano po kahalaga yung mindset, right? So indeed, mindset are students' beliefs about learning and school. Students who hold learning mindsets are more motivated to take on challenging work, persist in the face of setbacks, and achieve at higher levels. And of course, this kind of mindset, the growth mindset specifically, would play a very important role in conquering the many challenges posed upon, of course, not only by the same, but also by the virus, the coronavirus. Hindi natin alam kung kailan ito matatapos. But definitely, if we want to help our students, let's start, of course, with the first step. We have to help them, okay, grow. And of course, kung may fixed mindset sila, tanggalin natin yun. We have to, of course, help them create a growth mindset, because